like Sergey time. So how is all that working, man? Listen, I like your haircut, man. When did this happen?
Thank you. We seem to be starting these conversations with the discussion of my haircut.
It's important. I mean, I think it's the primary concern these days, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
How's my hair?
I would put it somewhere way at the top of my priorities.
Yeah, 100% important. Anyway, we're live, folks. We're live at Brainfood live on air at ridiculously early morning in the UK, but it's kind of like late afternoon for our friends down under. So welcome everybody and good afternoon to you. This is episode 93. And we're bringing it to you every Friday. And the reason why we're doing it at this time is because I'm personally very aware that I've massively neglected all of the Brainfood community down under. And that's simply because we do these shows at a time where everyone else is having their weekend, and rightly so. So I wanted to try and change it up for this week, get up a bit early and have a chat with all of you guys who are tuning in the afternoon in Australia and New Zealand. So welcome everybody. Hope everyone's okay. Anyway, quick sound check, everybody. Can you hear me okay? If you can hear me on Crowdcast, please say hello. We are multicasting, folks. I think we are live on LinkedIn. So if you can see this on LinkedIn, are we live on LinkedIn? I can never tell. It's just like complete. It's like I hope for the best. If I'm on live on LinkedIn, can you please say yes, Hung? You're okay, ready to go. And we're also broadcasting on Facebook, where we're getting some like 400 or 500 views every week. So we're getting lots of people watching there. So if you're in the group and you're watching, please say hello. Let me know everything's okay, AV wise. Okay, it looks like at least the folks in Crowdcast can hear us, which is great. Okay, that's awesome. Well, let's get on with the show. I mean, we always firstly want to say a big shout out to our sponsors, but it's a special one this week because our sponsors have been roped in to co-host this show. And I'm delighted to welcome Sergey Makhmadov. Have I got your name correct, Sergey? Probably not. And I beg
you never do, man.
What is it?
But that's fine.
Give it to me, man. What is the second name?
Makhmadov.
Makhmadov.
Yeah, that's right.
Makhmadov. Okay, Sergey, how are you doing? Could you quickly introduce yourself, who you are, what do you do?
Doing well, thank you. Good to see so many people joining us now. I'm doing all right. I represent Daxtra Technologies. We're a software company that delivers automation solutions that help our clients to get the most out of their recruitment data, search, matching, parsing, etc. I am based in Hong Kong, but yes, we do have offices in Australia, currently in Sydney only, where we have representatives who look after our Australian clients.
Yeah, did you have somebody on site in Sydney, or is it all the team still based in Hong Kong?
No, we do have people in Sydney.
Do you? Okay.
We've had a physical office in Sydney for the past 3 years, I would say.
Yeah. Awesome. And is kind of the market big for you guys in Australia, New Zealand, or is it sort of you're generally based in Asia Pac for, personal reasons, I guess, or whatever?
Well, look, Hong Kong was chosen as our APAC hub purely because of the location. It's bang in the middle between Europe and Australia.
Yeah.
It's obviously in a very close proximity to other Asian regions like Singapore, mainland China, Japan. All of these, including Australia, are growth markets. Australia in particular is very interesting, and it's currently a big contributor to our APAC revenue because the business processes, the setups of companies are very similar to the UK ones or US ones, where we perhaps have more experience. So when we ventured into Asia, Australia was a much lower hanging fruit for us than, let's say, China or Japan.
Yeah. I mean, those are. I mean, I'd love to do a show focused on those two countries. So they're like separate, different. They're very different ecosystems, very different economies, very different cultures. So, anyway, let's get on with it. And did you read the newsletter last week, Sergey? And if you did, what was interesting?
Of course I did. I found a couple of pieces. Well, quite a few actually, but two in particular. I really enjoyed reading Daniel Rebrero's piece, blog about downsizing the team. For those who haven't read it, it's quite interesting. The guy just got promoted to the CTO on day one, and then on day two, he was tasked to essentially downsize the workforce, and he gives very interesting, insightful tips. At Dexter, we were quite lucky this time around. We have not had to retreat to any drastic measures like this, but it does kind of reverberate with regards to what we went through in the great financial crisis, previous recession. So we had to retreat to some of these measures. So that's interesting. Another one I found quite interesting was a piece by Josh Bersin about remote working. So that gives a very, very interesting insights about like ability of people to work remotely depending on the age category.
Yes.
Again, that kind of is quite close to us, as I'm sure to you guys as well, because especially in 2020, we had to pretty much across the company for various periods of time to retreat to working from home.
You know what? That's super interesting about the age, because working from home, there's probably a sweet spot where it's perfect in the sense that, let's say you're like, you've got some money, so you have your own space. So you're not in some sort of crowd share. You're not just living with your parents still, but you may be pre-children, let's say. That's probably perfect because you basically can control your environment. But if you're any older, you've got kids that are homeschooling or whatever, got to be a nightmare, right? When you're
I would actually go further and say that it's not just the age. Of course, it's a lot more complex and granular. Some people just find it easier to work from home than other people. And it's important, I think, for companies to be able to recognize that, because going forward, that would help to shape the company structure accordingly.
Yeah, big DE&I issue. And I just wonder, when we start sort of thinking about this properly, are we going to start like putting people in different tracks based on their home or domestic circumstances? Because you may have to do that. If you distribute a business and, you've got to think, okay, this person has got like 3 kids, they're triplets, let's say, and they're 3 years old. What are you going to do? That person is going to have less time and ability to focus on the work that you need doing. And you've got to find a way in which this person can still contribute to the organization, not be diminished in any way, but also take into a fact that they're unlikely to be able to supply the same degree of focus that they would do if they were coming into the office. So it's going to be a really difficult problem for performance management, for compensation, for all those types of things. I think we're going to head straight into this as soon as we agree, what the next phase is going to look like. Although you guys in Hong Kong, I think also in Australia, are kind of back into office mode, aren't you? So maybe the solution might just be to switch back to office. So
I guess I can say that we've been lucky in Hong Kong. Hong Kong never had a strict lockdown where the government would say you have to stay at home. There was a period of time during summer when the government strongly recommended, and it was illegal for companies to force people to come to the offices. So all of our staff were working from home for about like a month or so. But since then, we came back to the office, but we kept the relaxed rules about this. So till this day, and frankly speaking, going forward as well, I don't see the reason why we wouldn't allow people to work from home if they feel that they can still meet their objectives, KPIs, and yet stay motivated. As I said, it's kind of the type of personality that perhaps allows for that. So there is that. But in the UK, the situation is completely different. People are still working from homes, and there seemingly is no end to that. So Hong, you probably, you definitely know that. And then, of course, we have Australia, where Sydney didn't go into strict lockdown, but Melbourne did for nearly 9 months, I think.
Yeah, you have to understand we have a world-beating COVID strategy in the UK, world class, and it essentially involves kind of saying over-promising positive things whilst completely under-delivering the necessary hard truths. That's basically the policy of this British government. Anyway, let's get on with it. By the way, I just seen Jeanette. Jeanette's actually in Auckland, and I want to bring her on because I know New Zealand's even further out, right? So they're well into their weekend. But I want to bring on Jeanette if she's there, and we're going to get talking about. By the way, folks, the reason why we're doing this show is also let's figure out what sort of recruiting is going to look like in Australia and New Zealand for 2021. But also let's have a look at some of these like so-called universal concepts that we talk about a lot on Brainfood, we talk a lot in the industry in general, and how do they apply into the local market? So we did a similar one for Asia Pac before, where we talked to people in Thailand, Vietnam, and so on. What does DE&I mean, for instance, in New Zealand? How important is UBI in Australia? Stuff like this. So we're going to get into that. But I see Jeanette here. Jeanette, I hope you're ready. I'm going to bring you on like on spec. She hasn't prepared for this. She doesn't even know I'm going to do this. But I saw her. She made the mistake of commenting publicly. And when you do that, it basically means you can get roped in. So it's happening. I think she's probably on the beach right now. Is it like, I don't know what time it is in Auckland, but it's probably what, 6 o'clock or something in New Zealand. I think this year I was meant to go to New Zealand for the first time. That was the plan way back when, but of course not happening. And indeed, probably not for a while, because I read some report earlier this morning about the idea of maybe there being a Pacific bubble or something, where generally speaking, people are going to be comfortable moving in and out in the local area. But over here in Europe, basically Europe is saying, EU is saying, hey, listen, we might need to ban the UK from going into Europe. So it's like a proper Brexit. Like, about Brexit on top of COVID. This is turning into North Korea here. It's like
it's a very sad situation. UK is banned from entering Hong Kong now because of COVID. Which
personally for me is a disaster, because my plans would come in there, and I need to figure out a way to do it, because there's some residency stuff I've got to take care of, some bank stuff I've got to take care of, and the clock is ticking, so it's really difficult. Okay, I think Jeanette's struggling. Don't worry, Jeanette, we're going to try and bring you on anyway, if we're going to keep trying. So, but in the meantime, let's bring on another Kiwi, who happens to be I think she's in Sydney. So this is Hasana Rudd. And we're going to bring on Michael Delaney as well. He's always good TV, aren't you, Michael? There you go. Cool. So we're going to speak to we're going to speak to in-house recruiters. We're going to speak to agency recruiters. We're going to speak to a few consultants as well. Different topics, different things. Let's see what is going on. I hope people can get this invite and accept and get on. Oh, there's Hasana. I can tell by the hair.
Hey guys.
Straight away. How are you doing, Hasana?
Not too bad, not too bad. It's pretty hot down here in Sydney today. Still sitting around 32 degrees, I think.
Oh,
so inside with the aircon on.
No, that actually sounds really good, positive. There he is, Michael Delaney. How are you doing, Michael?
Alex, how you going?
Yeah, good, man. Good to see you.
Hi, Michael.
Hey, for the two who've just joined us, Hasana, can you quickly introduce yourself, who you are and what it is you do?
Yep, so I'm Hasana Rudd. I have the nightmare first name. I apologise for that. My parents went into the 60s in a really big way. 10 years later, they had my sister and she got Georgina. I am the global head of talent for a tech company called Squiz. Based and headquartered down in Sydney with offices all over the globe. Well, cool. When we're in the offices, if we go back to the offices.
Indeed. So, and how about you, Michael? Who are you?
Yeah, so Michael Delaney. I have the most boring name in the world. Before I'm wearing the most colourful shirt I could possibly have to make up for that. And I'm the head of talent for a force management company called Human Force. We're in Sydney, Melbourne, Auckland, and the UK.
Yeah, amazing. Well, listen, welcome to you two to the show. Delighted to have a chat with you guys. Reason why I brought you on together, by the way, because you're both kind of in-house looking out into the market. And it's kind of interesting just to get a little bit of a benchmark to see how you feel about 2021 in terms of hiring, in terms of growth and all that type of stuff. Because, we're getting different signals in different places where sometimes people are very positive saying, yeah, we're going to bounce back and hiring's going crazy. Other times it's like, hey, actually, no, we're going to hire more like alternative workers, like less full-time and all this type of stuff. So what's your read on it so far from the instructions that you've been getting from the top in your own businesses there? Let's go with you first on that, Hasana.
Growth. It definitely is growth in some of the markets, particularly for us, the US, and definitely down in ANZ. We're also, investing a little bit more in the UK. So there, even though you're plague-ridden up there, we are actually growing in the UK market. I think Michael will probably echo this. In terms of tech talent, it is a bun fight out there. As an example, particularly for Australia, a lot of our big competitors for the same talent would be used to get a lot of the talent offshore and import it. We can't do that anymore. So now, like the likes of sort of like the Atlassians and Canvas and those that would potentially, bring in, like, say, React talent offshore and import it, they're not doing it so much. Now they're actually competing with us in the same market. So the market is extraordinarily fast moving, very, very fast.
Right. So let me just step in there, Hassan. That's a really interesting point. So tech recruiting is going nuts. Everyone is like scrambling for the talent, but actually COVID-19 has had an impact because it's prevented basically immigration to a large degree. Like, you can't bring people in, and Australia historically has done that. The history of the country is all about this. But at the same time, when you're talking about these global firms, of course, they're bringing in talent from different parts of the world into the country. You can't do that. So competition is fierce for local talent, ever more so. What are your thoughts on this, Michael? How are you seeing it from your side?
So I agree. I think there's definitely a lot more competition. I think there's a couple of factors that we certainly have to take really into account. So the recession that we're experiencing this time around from COVID has unfortunately impacted women at much greater rates than any other employment group. So that's both in unemployment, but in the much more insidious form of underemployment. Right? So there are people.
Hang on, that's a big statement, Michael. That's a big statement, and I don't want to dispute it, but I want you to unpack it a little bit more. So what do you mean there's a gender divide between, the economic impact here?
So according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the number of women losing their jobs far outstripped the number of men this time round, versus the last recession we had was much more the 25 to 35-year-old male bracket.
Right.
But women were already experiencing overinflated underemployment, so not working full-time hours even though they wanted to. And this has simply been completely blown up by COVID. So what I think we might see happen, and it goes to the point of diversity and inclusion, this flexible work environment may well be the greatest key we have to properly engaging the workforce that's out there that are currently desperate, who can now work from home. And I know we talked about before, look, it may be difficult, there may be challenges, you've got 3 kids at home, but if the choice is having a full-time job and having it in a flexible environment so you can be gainfully employed and contributing, or not working those hours because a company won't allow it, I think if you're an employer right now saying you have to come back to the office, you're on an absolute losing streak and you will no longer have a brand that's worthwhile within 6 months.
Okay, that's really interesting commentary there. There's 2 things, I want to talk about both of the things that you mentioned. So let's go back to Hassana's point first, and then we're going to swing straight back into this idea of how remote working has this impact on potential diversification of the workforce, right? So remote working, it's a bun fight for local talent. What's happening in terms of the remote anywhere? Because it can flip very easily, right? Companies that are struggling to hire internally, you can't import. Okay, great, let's push the job out to wherever it is. Is that happening in for your business, Hassana, or is your business still saying no? They've got to be Australian citizens or Australian time zone or something?
No, to a level, no, because we've got offices in Australia, New Zealand, Poland, London, Edinburgh, and all over the States. So it isn't uncommon for us to, decide, okay, well, we're actually going to recruit that headcount here as opposed to here. Actually, we're going to we'll find it easier to put that here. And, this week there was a whole debate about a particular role in the States, and it was like, well, actually, it could be anywhere. This is a more senior role. This is something that could be anywhere. How would we go around approaching and getting that as opposed to putting it near our main hubs? In terms of the remote piece, it's more going to be blended. That's really what we're doing, more of a blended piece. So, some people are coming back into the office a couple of days a week. Some are coming in 3 days. So we've allowed the teams to go create what works for you. Yeah. So as an example, our tech sales team are coming in 3 days a week so they can get some FaceTime and be together, and then work from home on the other 2 days of the week. Other teams have worked it themselves in a different way around sort of various squads and chapters. So there's got to be a blend and an ability to mix and match. The challenge comes though, and McKinsey, it was very interesting when you were talking about the impact in terms of being fully remote. McKinsey had put a good piece of research out around the younger people in our workforce. A lot of them are in like flatting or shared housing. They can't really work from home, number one. And then number two, they're really missing out on that interaction piece, those corridor conversations that get you in front of senior leadership, that, so that impact on what does that mean for promotional opportunities, wider into the future. There's still a lot more to be done there.
This is why I'm a massive critic of like hybrid model, because it's going to screw stuff like promotions, and because you're going to inevitably be promoting people that you have line of sight on, and you're going to diverge the two kind of communities that can work remote and the ones that can't. So there's a kind of worms that we've kind of looked at. We don't know what it is, but we're going to be smelling that soon. So it's going to be fascinating. Lots of interesting things you said, particularly about when you're doing job creation. We, as recruiters, if you've got an international type of business, or you've got an attitude where the job can be anywhere, you're going to have to start having the conversation, where do you put the job? Like actively, this is a very early part of the conversation. Where is the optimal place to position a job? So suddenly everyone is like a global recruiter, whereas before maybe you were thinking, purely locally. Okay, let's switch back to the diversity side of it, because I think this is like, by the way, every topic we could speak 3 hours on, but I want to just like skate on some of these things, because I do think they're really, really significant. Now, Michael, you were mentioning, okay, this entire situation has had a disproportionate impact on certain communities, which is a negative thing, of course. However, you kind of also said the way to bounce back is to really work with this remote idea, because it might actually unlock the flexibility of working, which had previously prevented a lot of people from actually engaging in the workforce. Like we do know, for instance, the 9 to 5, come into the office 5 days a week, that structure was designed for a certain type of person in a certain lifestyle that had set it up in a certain way. I think I made a kind of an exaggerated example at the beginning of, the parent with triplets. How are you going to do that commute? How are you going to do that thing? You can't. It's not designed for a person with young family. So, and as you say, with the disproportionate impact of responsibilities for child giving typically falling onto the woman, then obviously you then see the gender impact. So you're saying remote working might actually unlock this. Explain how this actually works, Michael. What's your view on how the remote working can actually improve gender diversity in the workforce?
Yeah, so I think, and obviously it doesn't work for every sector, right? So let's be clear. If you're in an aged care facility, for example, you can't just dial in to check on your patients, right? So there's only going to be some industries that it can work for. But if you have the capacity to say to somebody, right, your job, if you're, a finance officer, you can do that job from anywhere. You don't need to be in the office to run reports, to do payments, to accrue money. You can do that anywhere in the world. And if you allow that degree of flexibility, you open up roles to people who've otherwise been locked out. If you look at people, for example, who are already immunocompromised, right, who probably had struggles in going into an office before COVID, and suddenly they're at a point where if they catch COVID, they literally could die. If you let them have an opportunity to contribute to the workforce, immediately you raise a group of people potentially out of poverty who have otherwise been totally restricted to the work that they could do. And I know, look, we focus a lot on gender because it's one of the easiest things for us to measure. It's pretty simple to determine how many men, how many women do we have. And this is where a lot of the stats are coming from, because we can see how many women who have lost their jobs. Remote work gives access to people to jobs they would not otherwise be able to do. Some of that is health. Some of that might be the cost of living. If you're trying to buy a house in Sydney, you're not buying a house near the centre of town. You're probably buying 2.5, sometimes 3 hours out. Asking somebody to commute immediately makes their life untenable as a potential employee. So I think it gives us an opportunity, right? It's not to say that it will fix everything, but if we go after it like this, and you mentioned promotions and things. So here's a chance for us to reimagine what workforce management looks like. Instead of sitting there and saying, right, well, I can see Hasana over the table and therefore she must be good because she's here and she's got a great voice and, like, she must be doing wonderful things. If you can measure people on actual output, on actual performance, then it doesn't matter where they are, and you make it a criterion-based decision as opposed to I like Hasana, she's awesome. And by the way, she is awesome, and I do really like her, so just give her the job, whatever it is. Let's just promote her because she's fabulous. But we could create a new employment paradigm that opens things up for people to be judged only on what they do, not on whether they are the nicest or the loudest or the best looking.
All right, I want to summarize this real quick because I think it's a really important point. What you're saying, Michael, is essentially all of the things that people are moaning about. Oh, we miss the office chatter, we miss the, the team camaraderie and all that. No, that's like bootlicking. That's like literally brown nosing your way up the career ladder. That is unmeritocratic way of career. And in fact, what you need to do is embrace a fair way to do it. It's not about your like charisma in the corridor. Do you know what I mean? It's about your performance and output in the work that you're doing. So I think that's a really important angle. I don't think, of course, it's not as simple as that, but I do think it is because a lot of the things, like there's two types of people that succeed in business, isn't there? Like we all know the person that we all resent, the person gets an accelerated promotion, like he never did that. Like the guy who gets all the credit and you think, man, I did that work. You know what? The reason why he's going up as fast as he is because he is a great schmoozer. And he does have these great like ability to project his sort of profile internally, and he knows how to have a golf with the boss or whatever it is. All of the things that you're taught to do, in terms of career progression is actually not related to the function of your job. Now, is that fair? Has it ever been fair? No. So maybe the distribution of the workforce gives us a chance to try and bump people up in a different way. Let's say you're an introvert person who's actually a fantastic performer, but you were never comfortable in that type of, like you had anxiety attack or something when you were speaking to somebody at senior level or whatnot. That happens. Why should that be an impediment to your ability to get justly rewarded for the work that you do? So that's a really interesting sort of avenue to go down. And I just wonder what people think about that. I mean, is that something we should embrace, folks? I mean, you tell me. I mean, is the office, the stuff that we cherish about the office, was it always unfair?
Look, I think it is. I bang on about diversity and inclusion all the time. And I think it's incredibly important that we do, because as a middle-aged white guy, I'm included in everything. There's not a single thing that I'm excluded from. And it really annoys me when you see people, as you say, right, the introvert or the person who isn't able to be there till 7 o'clock having drinks with the boss. We need to reimagine work, and we've got this opportunity now. We don't often have these times where we can just say, right, blank slate, let's just say, what if? What if we created a fairer and more equitable workplace? What would happen? And the question I ask, because people say all the time, oh, look, what could go wrong? This could go wrong, that could go wrong. The question I've learned to ask myself recently is, what's the best thing that could happen? And the best thing that could happen is we had a fair and equitable distribution of work. It's never going to be completely, but much fairer than as an entire society, we would be 100% better than we are today. And I know that's idealistic, but as the man wearing the pink shirt, I'm going to be as idealistic as I like.
Yeah, I would say what I would add to that is one of the key things around in-house, and particularly in sort of like in-house leadership roles, is the critical part of the ability to influence. To be a complete, a proper partner to the business. You're not master servant in this respect. It's like, how do you push, nudge, and influence those decisions? Because in a lot of environments, I think someone mentioned in the comments that it does take a maturity of leadership. A lot of what we went through last year pushed a lot of leaders really far outside of their comfort zones, right outside of their comfort zones. And, the challenge then is, how do you prevent them from snapping back? Because you've got to be able to coach them. You've got to be able to guide them. You've got to be able to support their learnings in how they, manage people in a different environment, which also then means when we're, I think we're probably not alone in this, is that we have been onboarding remotely virtually everybody, for the better part of a year. That's a challenge as well for a lot of leaders as well. So it's how we get up alongside them, how we keep the conversations going, how do we keep them moving in those directions. That means that in a post-COVID world, whenever that is, it doesn't slowly go. We don't lose the forward movement we've made. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the relationship between recruiters, the recruiting function, and the hiring manager, that's up for negotiation as well. Because we've had a different set of responsibilities suddenly, haven't we? Like we went from, you need to grow this team, and then suddenly we needed to do redeployment and all this care about the employee base and this type of stuff. So I think there's a scope for this as well. Anyway, listen, I noticed the time, we're flying through it. Before I let you two go, I just wanted to focus on the DE&I topic. How important do you think this is in Australia and New Zealand? I mean, is it something that is, would you say it's aligned with the rest of, the US, UK, for instance, and how they talk about it? Or are they different, like a local conditions which make it different in terms of what you need to care about? So a quick answer on this, because we've got to move on. Let's go to you first, Hasana.
Yes is the answer. DE&I is critically vital down here. I can talk from it on a tech angle. It's not a huge surprise that it's very bloke heavy in its way, but to Michael's part, it isn't just around sort of like gender diversity. We don't do enough around accessibility with people with disabled people with disabilities either coming into that. And then obviously for Australia, we also have a huge amount of work to do with our First People. Yeah, it's a really small percentage of the population, but we're not doing enough. But how do we engage and bring those people through into different careers and actually support that through in terms of reconciliation action plans? So there's still a huge amount of work. It just looks a little differently.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most unique angle, isn't it, in Australia and New Zealand, where you're looking at First Peoples and obviously trying to create a more equitable environment and make a better opportunity for people to participate in the society that's been created. Okay, quick one to you, Michael, to finish off. By the way, when are you sort of standing for political office, man? Because you got my vote. You've got my vote.
Any political party that would have me as a party I don't want to join. Let's be real about this.
Would you vote for Michael Delaney? I think yes. I mean, I'm down, man. Just do it. Anyway, quick one.
Quick one. I think it's been very important. I think we've made a lot of progress. I think that there will be some steps backwards coming out of COVID because everybody sort of runs away from the hard questions. But I think there's much greater commitment now for businesses to seriously do that. And I think, as to Hasana's point, the reconciliation action plans that businesses are rolling out now for our First Peoples is a massive step. So there's a lot more that we can do, but I think we're definitely getting there. And we're seeing a lot more focus and a lot more tech that's designed to help that. So my view is it's definitely there, but I think we can really have a running go at it this time round and try and jump 2 or 3 steps forward because of COVID.
Yeah.
Vote one Delaney.
Vote. That's it. Vote Delaney, number one. That's
Delaney United Party.
The first. Seriously, you should personally brand it. I think that would work. All right, listen. Thanks for you two. Please continue to watch the show. I might be able to bring you back later, but we've got loads of people to bring on, so we're gonna keep rolling through. Thank you, Hasana, and thank you, Michael.
Thank you, guys.
Well, great people to bring on and have a chat about.
Really fascinating.
Yeah, fascinating and interesting. And also, there's loads of topics uncovered there. The idea of promotion internally and externally, how you do that when it's distributed or hybrid. The gender.
And the role of the leadership in doing so, making this change, is vital here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of it will be, who is it that said, maybe it was Michael that said, there's an existential kind of moment for companies that if you don't get this right, then actually in the new world that you're going to emerge into, you might end up being fundamentally uncompetitive as a business. Anyway, let's bring on Andrea Kirby very quickly. Andrea is actually at a wedding, but she's like abandoned her best friend in order to try and attend Brainfood Live. She's got her priorities right. And I just hope I'm going to like be able to catch her in a, I guess I was going to say a sober state. That's the wrong thing to say, isn't it? I'm sure she's only two flutes of champagne in. Let's see if she's there. She might not be.
Let's hope it was only two.
She's at a wedding. So Andrew's at a wedding. She may not actually turn up. Oh, there she is. There is the champagne.
Hi, Andrea. How you doing,
Can you hear me okay? I'm sitting out in
perfect.
the courtyard at the Park Hyatt. The sun is shining. There's blue sky hung.
It looks amazing. And I'm really feeling bad for taking you away from this party that you need to be fully embedded in. So thank you for joining us for the show, Andrea.
It was a tough call. It's my best friend, but I love you too. So
right. Well, I'm going to be making enemies with the bride here, so I need to get this moving. Andrea, I want to talk to you particularly about what the atmosphere is, because there's two angles I want to sort of touch in particular on. Firstly, on just the mood of the in-house recruiter market in Australia and New Zealand, because you being the community organizer and kind of event organizer, conference organizer over there, I suspect that you've got a lot of contacts with folks there. Overview, how does the community feel about 2021 in terms of hiring?
I finished 2020 feeling a little down in the dumps, having watched a lot of our community lose jobs. But it would be fair to say that it's picking up completely. So feeling a lot more optimistic. And there are a load of jobs going. I think we're still struggling at the senior end of the market, but definitely there's a lot going on. And when I've put it up in our Talent Table Tribe community, to have people come to me and say, actually, I'd like to talk to them about it, I think we're going to find people are moving around a lot. So, yeah, it's feeling fairly optimistic over here.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And you in particular have been involved in a bunch of really interesting initiatives. Was it Jobs for Australia and stuff like that, right? Yes. And some really big shout out to the people who've been involved in that, by the way. Joe, Rich Lewis, Jones, I think Pavi's been there doing that as well. So just
Rebecca Powell, Sandra Lim.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on.
That's like
they were the most amazing group of people who did amazing things for people that were looking for work. I just sat there and looked pretty. It's what I do.
That's, and that's not underrated, that's like a value add. That's important. Now, okay, let's talk about the, so I'm interested in firstly, the circulation of TA talent. So are you a job seeker? Have you been a job seeker? Have you seen like improvements in the marketplace? If so, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to be able to get a feel for this. I mean, it's not scientific, but I know sort of summer last year, it was like crisis time. A lot of people were feeling real panic. They were losing jobs, didn't have like clarity in terms of what the future looked like, really quite panicky. But hopefully, cross fingers, at least in Australia and New Zealand, countries that probably have handled the pandemic better than most. If there was a league table, you guys would be in the top echelon, I would say. Hopefully this means that people are getting jobs more easily than they were before. Okay, let's talk about the other side of this, because events is a huge part of why the recruiting community was great. You were doing the event side. How are you seeing that? Is there a bounce back to in person, or are we locked into virtual now forever?
I think going to be virtual forever. And, we ran a lot of virtual events last year, and it was terribly, it was great. We ran some fabulous content. But to have 700 people register and 100 turn up on the day, it makes you question why you are running events. We are doing our first live events in February. So we're coming up to Sydney on February the 18th to run an event that would be great for recruitment managers. Sergey, you really should be part of this event.
Andre, I would love to, but your country is shut, so.
Yeah, it's we're running a whole lot of new events now compared to what we've been running for the last 3 years. So we're actually going to start running events. We're coming up to Brisbane on March the 4th, but we are actually running a few more from Melbourne because that's where I'm based. But everything that we are running, apart from Talent Think Tank, which has to be a live event, we are doing hybrid. There is no other way that we could do it. But I think our community is desperate to get together, and that can be summed up in the fabulous Christmas parties we had before Christmas. People were so excited to get together and see each other. So hybrid is the way for us, but definitely moving to each city to run the events.
Yeah, so maybe smaller events, maybe more of them, and it's not like the mega conferences that we saw. It's going to look and feel a little bit different.
We're running Talent Palooza, and I hope you're wearing the T-shirt, Hung Lei.
Can I show you? Look at that.
Yeah, it is the most fabulous piece of art. No, get yours down, Sergey. So we are running Talent Palooza in March, which is a festival, all things talent. We're talking about employee experience, mental health, talent acquisition, marketing. Our theme is peace, love, and talent, and all the ways you can make your people feel guilty, groovy. Oh golly, I need to put champagne down, don't I?
Hey, I'm guilty enough. I don't need to go to an event to emphasize my scene.
So we are doing a thing about all the ways you can make your people feel groovy. We have a 1970s theme. Now, when we ran it in 2019, we had 350 people. We were expecting to go to 600 last year. We've built the event with 150 tickets on sale, and we go next week to talk to the event venue. Welcome to Thornbury, the food truck park in Melbourne, to say, okay, how can we sell more tickets and still be safe? So you start small and you build it in a COVID-safe way. But for us, because our borders closed, so Victoria has a traffic light system, Sydney a persona non grata at the moment, although I believe that's improving. How do we bring the people in from interstate? But we're building everything knowing that in Melbourne, who did it so tough last year, we will be at live events from February onwards.
At least you guys are starting doing live events, so that's already a great start.
Yeah, well, our first one, I think, is on February the 18th in Sydney. I'll be the one wearing the mask, Sydney people.
Yeah, you know what? You could actually make it into a thing, like do a mask ball and stuff like that. It can maybe turn it into a bit risque kind of vibe, you know. Who knows? I'll be up for that. No, very seriously, it's fantastic to see the return of some kind of live event. I think we also need to temper sort of the expectation. We can't just big bang it all the way back to how as it was. We need to be sensible. But we're also seeing, if you like, the thirst for this. So I'm hoping that we're going to be in a situation where, you know, we'll explore new ways in which we could do community. Okay, Andrea, I'm going to kick you off because you should be drinking champagne and having.
I need to go. Cheers. Big love to Kevin and Jenny, whose wedding I'm at today. And yeah, I'm going to go and do that. But check out our website. Or maybe .com. I'm just going to put it in the comments. And
yeah, definitely share it and check it out.
Register. And New Zealand.
See you later, Andrea.
Bye-bye.
You know what, Sergey? It's actually really good to see people like she's obviously outside of her bedroom, right? And she's interacting with folks. I think that's a nice thing to just have a sense that that's starting to happen. So yeah, well done on Melbourne in particular. I know they crunched down hard, but you get the reward for doing that. You know, if it's almost like if you don't grasp the hot iron at the right time, you're just going to get persistently burnt. You know, you just got to do it, and then you get over it. Okay, let's move swiftly on. We're going to be talking employer branding, folks, because this is another part which I think is super interesting for us. Because what has this year, what's going to look like for us going forward, given all of the things that we've seen in 2020. So we're going to bring on Mark Puncher and Ivan Harrison, and they're going to give us their verdict on how the EB world looks like. You know, how do you communicate your employee proposition, your employer proposition in this world that we have? There's Mark. How you doing, Mark?
I'm very well, mate. How are you?
Very good to see you. There's Ivan. How are you, Ivan?
Hey, I'm good, buddy.
Good to see you too.
Hi, guys. Good to meet you.
Hey, Sergey.
Okay, so Mark, for the people who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself, like who you are, what it is you do?
I'm just Ivan's mate. I think that's I'm CEO of Employer Brand in Australia. We're based in Brizzy, but we work across Australia, and I suppose it's all about authentic employer branding and recruitment marketing.
Absolutely, and great to have you on the show. I think the last time I saw you was probably the marathon last year, and you had a really great contribution there, Mark. So it's my pleasure to invite you back. Ivan, for the folks who don't know you, they should all thank themselves for that.
I think so. I mean,
who are you, and what it is you do?
So I'm leading the talent acquisition, employer branding journey at function at Club Assist. Club Assist, if you are one of over 10 million members of a roadside recovery company, much like the AA in the UK, we will typically be supplying your battery to keep you going on the road. And we're growing into energy storage. So we're looking to really start to push ourselves into that sort of Tesla space. So that's a big reason why I came on last June to sort of, you know, get ready for our big growth trajectory around Australia and beyond. That's
actually a really interesting EB challenge, isn't it? Because you've got a probably an established brand. I'm thinking anything doing road assistance is going to be established. You're not going to be a startup, but you're shifting into a super exciting space. So you're going from a mature brand to something that is like futuristic. Exactly. Talk about that. What are the EB challenges of doing that, Ivan?
It's very poignant, Hung, because coincidentally, you've paired Mark and I together. And actually, we're working with Employer Branding Australia right now, where we're building out our values, our refreshed values, and our EVP. And that will, of course, create the foundation for our external go-to market strategy. So we're actually partnering with Mark right now, and we're going through that journey in terms of having a large percentage of our current workforce who are roadside responders, you know, superheroes every day, going out on the road, you know, different terrains, different climates around Australia, where we need to look at how do we retain those people? How do we look at perhaps redeveloping them, reskilling them as we move more into that clean energy space? So it's really interesting in terms of that segmented approach around how do we attract people into very different job disciplines.
How has the impact of the last 12 months or so, has that factored into thinking around EB or not? I mean, straight talk. I mean, has it been a factor at all, or is it still actually, no, we still have to do this change of image, and that's what it is, you know? It's not a case where remote working, COVID-19, stuff like that has a huge impact. Thoughts on this, Mark?
Look, the first thing I'll say is it's never about a change of image, and Club Assist are a perfect example of it. So Club Assist are the organisation that they were a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. They are an organisation that's changing a huge amount, but that's not about brand or PR. That's about what they offer and how the services that are changing the organisation. What I think is really, so COVID is obviously relevant in terms of new ways of working, new expectations from employees and so on. But actually, at the heart of it, and this resonates across the whole of Australia, at the heart of it, it's another business with a series of leaders, some of whom are phenomenal, some of whom are really not people managers and people leaders, like every organisation, having those same relationships with employees that are either fantastic, awful, or somewhere in between. So actually, this whole piece, COVID has changed the context a little bit and some of the conversation, but actually most of it is about the same thing. How do you feel at work every day? Are you connected to the purpose? Are you connected to the strategy and goals? And do you feel that you're recognized for the contribution you make? And I've got to say that the project, obviously it's great to work with Ivan, somebody who gets it as strongly as he does, but what I love is it's not about PR and gloss. It's about managers in warehouses. It's about people managing roadside responders via phone and text message. It's, plus some office staff. So it's very, very real, very authentic, but it's not, the conversation hasn't suddenly dramatically changed.
Thoughts on that, Ivan?
Yeah, look, I was brought on last June to look at our growth agenda. So to Hasana's point, for us as well, we've been fortunate. I guess it's kind of a bittersweet story where through people's pain of not being able to start up their cars in lockdown, especially in Victoria, when they've gone to start their cars, batteries have been flat. We've actually had some record sales in our 30-year history. So for us, we've been doing very well. There's, as I said, there's lots of areas that we're growing into. How do we appeal to those people? How do we talk to those people directly? Where are they? How do we maintain like standard TA practice for many years? How do we continue to nurture those relationships with those right people? What I would say is that we are seeing, and I mentioned this on the chat earlier, with JobKeeper, with Job Seeker, obviously things have been delayed in Australia, month after month, and the money that the government has been given has been going down. But Australia has been lauded in terms of how the government's responded to COVID in that regard to keep people in jobs. But Job Seeker, JobKeeper, even the resurgence of the mines, we're seeing that it's harder to find good people. People are either wanting to just sort of stay as they are, or if they're working in the mining industry or other industries where they could be paid perhaps even double, they're staying put for now. So we're actually struggling without having a really strong employer brand. We're struggling from other elements to attracting the right people for us.
Okay, so this is quite interesting, and you're kind of dancing around the edges of this, Ivan. But are you saying that the government support for people that has been rightly lauded, but that's had a dampening effect on the candidate market, in the sense that people are going to be defensive? They're going to say, you know what, I'm going to see this year out. The government's supporting me doing this. I feel, I'm going to hibernate effectively for that 12 months or however long it is until I'm out of this, then look again. And that's caused actually a candidate short market. Is that more or less what you're saying? Yeah,
exactly. And I think that, like Sergey and others have mentioned, and we know when we look at a downturn, whether it's top talent or the low barrier to entry jobs, a lot of people are going to sort of stick with what they've got. And I know from friends and people in the hospitality industry, especially, that people in the cleaning industry, they're not going to want to go and do 40-hour, 50-hour week when they might only be earning a little bit more per week, per fortnight than staying on to Job Seeker. Obviously, in terms of JobKeeper, there's money's coming down further and further. So I think we're going to see, more people come back into the market. But again, it depends on the industry. It depends on the location. It's all very sort of segmented. For some industries and locations, it won't be as much of an impact. But for others, it definitely has. We have seen that.
That is fascinating, actually, because it's one of those classic economic stories, isn't it? Like a lot of the right-wing critics of the welfare state, it make exactly this argument to say, listen, if you're providing too strong a safety net, people are going to use it as a bed and sleep in it, and they're not actually going to say it will have the wrong effect. And it may be some of that is happening in the sense that, the difference between switching jobs now, it just doesn't make any sense. You can't ask people to be illogical. If you're saying, hey, listen, your sort of revenue per hour, your income per effort, let's say, is going to be better now than it is going to another job, why would you take that risk? It makes no sense to do that.
One thing, Hung, I think that's is further exacerbating it again, depending on the industry, the need of the business. I'm seeing and hearing more of offshoring, because obviously, where we're a global workforce, it's going to be interesting to see how local governments manage the offshoring of certain work. The rise of Fiverr, freelancing. There's a great tech hub in Israel, Tel Aviv, where you're going to be perhaps paying less, but for great minds. How do we tax that? How do we manage that? If a lot of work's going to be offshore because of we can't bring people onshore, especially during COVID, how do we manage that in terms of the candidates that we do have and redeveloping them and retraining them versus the money going out to offshore countries as well?
Yeah, I think government is going to legislate, and we're already starting to see it, where they're probably going to penalize companies for doing that and saying, hey, you need to have a certain percentage of if you're going to be a registered company in this state, you need to have a certain percentage of your employees actually in this state or see you. So I think that's probably going to be the case, but it might end up driving those companies out. So it's going to be very interesting. There is global, I'm a big fan of the idea of the War for Talent 2.0. And I know that over the last kind of several years, people have been criticizing the war for talent as like a bad metaphor. But it's going to come back in a different way, because what's happening is different territories are going to be competing for the talent. We've already seen, if you use the example of Tel Aviv, Tel Aviv are going to say, we're the offshoring center of this. You need to bring the jobs here because that makes sense for Tel Aviv. You're already seeing a lot of countries that are previously dependent on tourism now also rebranding themselves as the place where you could be a digital nomad. Barbados, it's 12 months visa, no problem. Just sign up on the website. You've got the visa. Come and work here. Why would you not go to Barbados for 12 months? So it's going to be a different type of competition for this top level talent. And it's going to be, I think, exciting, interesting, threatening, all at the same time.
I think the snapshot in terms of the growth of employer branding, people like Mark, who are fantastic at what they do, we've seen a massive proliferation both in New Zealand and Australia over the last few years. I mean, there's about, combined across ANZ, there's about 15,000 people on LinkedIn that are related to employer branding, talent brand. So, when I first came over in 2013, that was a very smaller number. So, we definitely, there's a lot of investment in employer branding, regardless of COVID. Australia, New Zealand are in the top 16, 17 in terms of the global talent competitive index. So look, we're in a good place. There definitely needs to be a lot more done about the basics. And Mark will probably talk to this better than I can. But we talk about technology and investment, but there's still a lot of basics where we can use tech in terms of the candidate experience, the hiring manager experience, to help us to develop and to really enhance that employer brand. There's still a lot of issues that we've got to do in Australia, and you could say arguably in many other markets.
Well, conscious of time, folks, but quick one before I let you both of you go. Employer brand as a big idea universally, but how does it differ in the Australian, New Zealand market? And I ask both of you, because obviously you're Brits that have come over, so you might have some kind of comparative angle on it. Is there any substantive difference between how the conversation happens in EB in Australia compared to other parts of the world? Go to you, Mark, on this.
Yeah, look, I think Australia is less mature in this space, obviously, than the UK and certainly the US. But we also, Australians and people in Australia also have a really sensitive bullshit detector, so which I love. So this whole thing of just tell us the truth.
I was going to have a proper Ivan there. I mean, so it's like, if that's the case, how come Ivan's still resident in the country?
Well, I'll stand with him on that. But look, I think I always bang on about the authenticity thing, but I think the biggest problem right now is employees staying with companies because they're too afraid to leave, or because of the uncertainty, which a few people have said in the chat. I also think we've got to be careful around culture, because there's this isn't backed by evidence, but I'm seeing more and more a divide between those pretty shitty employers getting a lot worse and just being draconian, and the rise in investment in technology to check that people are logging onto their computer. is, you know, to check they're working is just kills me.
I love it.
And then on the other side, you've got these employers that are caring and want to do the right thing. My concern there, I think that's great. There's a big focus in Australia and New Zealand right now on well-being and engagement, which obviously is a good thing. But we've got to be so careful about all of that stuff. What I'm seeing is at worst, it can breed entitlement. And for me, the biggest thing is while you're doing the engagement and the well-being, you have to do strategy and goals and obviously purpose. People need to say people need to be joining you, connected to what you're trying to achieve, understanding what they need to contribute, and then feeling valued and rewarded and recognized when they deliver. Not just let's have massage at your desk because poor little you. You know, we're their employer, not their parent. So I really have a big thing about this because I think there's a lot of great employers trying to do the right thing. And I think they're overdoing it and creating a bit of a, you know, here we are now, entertain us culture.
Mark, I think that's a really super topic. Definitely we need to explore that. Like, are we overdoing the well-being side? This is like massive sympathy for anybody with mental health issues and stuff like that. I myself have been conscious of my own mental state recently. I'm thinking, holy crap, Hung, are you depressed? No, I'm not. Just, you know, drinking too much coffee. But the truth is, you've got to monitor this, right? I think it's a real positive thing that people are caring about it. But as you say, Mark, if it's undirected and it's just like thrown out there and it's not connected to what the business is about, then suddenly we need to, you know, we need to be careful as to whether the company should play that particular role. As you say, it's not there to be a parent. We can't be paternalistic. There's a business goal to all of this.
And perks and benefits and care and everything else is obviously about doing the right thing. But the fundamental point, the relationship that you have is about we pay you to do a job and you do the job. So those things should be there as enablers to bring the best you, to be well, to perform. You know, and I'm just seeing a lot. We saw it with COVID, you know, CEOs jumping on LinkedIn with playing guitar when their employees were actually getting no communications about what the plan was. So there's a lot of superficial stuff. But then even beyond that, I think a lot of good intention. But it can't be this, like, have another gift. It's got to be, you know, my team are brilliant, absolutely amazing people. And they know that I'm their employer. And that when we say 9-day fortnights and when we say flexible culture or relaxed culture, it's so that they can bring their best, not because I'm a lucky guy.
Yeah.
No, you agree with this, Sergey?
No, nail on the head.
Yeah. That's really,
both of you.
Really, really interesting. That's a topic for another time. Listen, I've got to let you two go.
We should definitely explore it as another topic.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Well-being, like as you say, if you type well-being into any kind of search for a video or a podcast, you get lots of things on how to do it. But maybe we need to talk about, look, are you overdoing it? I mean, that's something that is worth exploring. Okay, you two, you hang around. We might be able to bring you back later, but I realize how late we are in the day, so I'm gonna have to say goodbye to you on screen. So thank you very much.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you very much,
guys.
Mark. Okay, we're gonna move swiftly on. So, guys, sorry for the people who want to come on. You are coming on shortly. I just got to make sure everything is happening. I'm gonna bring on Zichuan and Lauren. We're going to be talking about different things here. We're going to talk agency side. We're going to talk about a relationship between agencies and kind of third party. Let's have a look at how those things are operating and see how we go. Gareth, we'll bring you on very shortly, sir. I know you've been waiting, man. And Stan, of course. Stan, I was going to bring him on to answer the questions, but no one's asked any questions. So if you have any questions you want to ask, please put them in the comments. Sorry, not in the comments, in the ask a question feature below, and we'll get to them at the end of the show. Oh, there he is. How are you doing, man?
Hey, good, thanks. How are you?
Thanks for waiting along. I know it's like already half an hour after the time you are scheduled to come on, dude.
No worries. It's a great chat so far, so happy. Hey, Lauren.
Hey, there's Lauren. How are you doing, Lauren?
I'm good, everybody. How are you?
Cool, we're very good. Okay, let's do some quick introductions. Okay, let's go to you first, Zichuan. Who are you and what it is you do?
Yeah, sure. I'm Zichuan. Most people call me Z, so go for it if that's easier for you. I work as a coach, consultant, and contractor in the TA operations space. So TA analytics, processes, tech selection, and tech implementation is pretty much what I focus on.
Amazing. Okay, Lauren, for the few people who don't know you, who are you and what it is you do?
I'm the good-looking half of Tarpod, the podcast in Australia for talent acquisition, and I also have my own little agency of just me at the moment, expanding, and I'm also do talent acquisition for a small consulting firm. So I've got my fingers in all pies.
Cool. And the reason why it's cool to get you two on, because you can, with the sort of portfolio style of work that you both are involved in, you get a different angle from it than the people that are working in a corporate looking out and only seeing the walls of their own building, let's say. So I'm interested to know what your thoughts are generally on the hiring market in general in ANZ. Whether it is buying technology, whether it's hiring new people. What are your thoughts? Lauren, let's go to you first.
I think we are going to be so candidate short over the next 12 to 18 months that we're going to see a knock-on effect that's going to last for a few years to come. I'm predominantly in the tech world. We just, as was mentioned earlier, we've got no immigration, nothing at all coming in, and we rely heavily on tech immigration. We do not have the infrastructure in our universities that are turning out the people quick enough to the demand and the technology knowledge of everything here and required. And we're looking at a year of projects that have just all been delayed and put on ice because no one knew what was going to happen. And now everyone's hit this year running, wanting to hire, wanting the demand for the good people, which has already been mentioned that they're not leaving. They're not leaving their good job if they're in a good place. The counter offers are coming thick and fast to keep them. I think the salaries are going to start going quite up in the tech industry. Other areas, they're saying salaries are going to stick around the same. The demand is just insane across Australia and New Zealand at the moment. And I think that people are also going to be looking at that security because on a flip of a coin, we can be shutting a state border and no one's going anywhere and things like that. So we've also lost out on our gig economy. We've got no backpackers coming in. All of our restaurants and those types of industries, your Uber Eats drivers, all of that, they're gone. They're totally gone. So we've got no international students coming in either.
Okay, this is actually really interesting because has this kind of cut off of the immigrant labor and skills, has that changed the conversation in immigration in Australia? Because every country has this issue about, too many immigrants, we've got to, put the walls up, etc. Well, the fucking wall's up. I mean, no one's coming in. Like, has that changed the attitude in any way?
We've always had a labour shortage in certain areas in this country, always. So we need to be constantly bringing people in and growing our population base. We're not breeding quick enough, to be honest. And so that's another conversation. But anyway, so look what we need to do. We are so short on tech resources. I don't know where we're going to start pulling them from because not all companies are comfortable with an offshore model. Getting them to be comfortable hiring someone interstate and not coming into the office, some of them it's a battle. So yeah, we've got some pretty hectic things that are going to knock on for years to come here.
This is actually. I was going to say that this is quite interesting also on the back of what Ivan said a few minutes ago about the candidate mobility, which is significantly reduced now because people are very cautious, apprehensive about changing jobs. That is associated with a lot of risk. But on top of that, if you have borders closed, then that potentially presents a large problem in terms of shortage of candidates and skills.
Yeah, that's a different type of conversation maybe you need to start having with candidates, isn't it? Before, you got to do all this kind of like de-risking of a potential move, and then also factor in that there's a heightened chance of this person actually dropping out in the process at any point.
The counter offer, I can tell you now, constantly
as well.
Yeah. You've got to really look after them right from the minute you make that first initial phone call. Job ads have gone up. We're pre-COVID level on all of those types of things. There's definitely the demand out there. We just have the wrong skills in the wrong area. Another few things I just had a look at is our health sector is really struggling at the moment. We're not getting enough qualified nurses or qualified doctors, but then all the other associated roles that come with that and the certifications that are required. There's just not those areas as well. And our infrastructure and construction, the amount of people we actually get in from overseas to actually build that industry up as well, it's also going to be lagging.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. As you say, Australia's always been like growing economy. You need the input in, and there's all a casual economy, students, backpackers, plus bringing highly skilled individuals in as well. You cut all that off, suddenly all of these economies are going to struggle to grow. This should mean good news for you, Z, shouldn't it? If you're doing like implementation stuff, are you like the richest man in right now? Like, how does it all work for you now?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I think Lauren is right. Australia does rely, and everyone who said it before, Australia relies a lot on immigrants. And I'm a son. My parents were immigrants, funnily enough, from the UK across to Australia. And my mum's a nurse, my dad's an engineer. So it's a classic kind of story, moving across, setting up over here, and then here I am. But it's tricky, because I run a martial arts school. That's where I am, behind me. And finding instructors is a challenge as well. So I think Australia is we're really built well for kind of like white collar standard roles, marketing, sales jobs, accounting. We used to do a lot of importing of as well, but these days we were okay. But there are so many holes in our economy. Hairdressers, you can never find enough hairdressers. Chefs, can never find enough chefs. So there are so many roles out here.
Again, as you're saying, the gig economy there, they are bolstered up by those things. Like last time I was at the hairdresser, my hairdresser can't find anyone. And she said, normally I'd get a backpacker in here for 6 or 12 months, and then the next one would come in. They're not here.
That's really, it's a really interesting phenomenon, because Australia's always had that circulation, hasn't it? Like you send a lot of the kids out, you get a lot of kids coming in, and that type of thing is reliable because Australia is such a wonderful place to visit, and for people to want to spend time, you can bank on that. Lots of people wanted to do it. But
we rely a lot on the gap year gig economy. That is huge in our country. Yeah,
I think there's a whole bunch of fruit sitting on trees because there aren't enough people to pick them off. I mean, that's how bad it's got. In terms of my job, implementations and stuff, it's helpful. I can't complain too much. So it's good being, someone who can do that. And I think Lauren made a comment about offshoring as well. I think one of what I saw was with India being affected so heavily with COVID, and India is not really the best infrastructure, in terms of Wi-Fi or internet connectivity outside some of the major hubs. So when countries like that shut down, you actually can't do your offshoring. And Philippines as well, when they have waves and stuff, the whole office shuts down. So your whole offshore team is offline. And then that creates huge problems as well.
Yeah, it's interesting how countries are going to sort of handle the challenges of offshoring, because you want your businesses to continue, because it makes no sense to not grow those companies, which means that sometimes you need to offshore. But the governments are going to see, oh my goodness, these jobs are leaving. Where's the tax revenue going to be? That's like tax dollars disappearing. We need to try and keep them here. But you keep the jobs here, and there's literally no labor, and you're forcing your recruiters to work extra hard to try and find people that might not even be there. So it's going to be a very difficult nut to crack, really. Lauren, as an agent, doesn't this mean that things like fees can go up and stuff like this? Are we like going back to, hey, let's go 25%, let's go 30% on these things?
I don't think you're going to see that. You're going to see some of the bigger agencies pop that, but the agencies, I'm really only a one-man band, and I'm growing. So and if I didn't have my little one-man band, I got made redundant from my full-time TA job in last year. So I would have been up the creek. So I've been really good with that. But they're saying the fees are beginning to go up slightly, but a lot of employers are not going to wear it. It's because they're just the demand's not going to change anything if the fee change. I can't see it changing too much. So go up slightly, but not overly.
Yeah, that's an interesting phenomena. Like, what is the pricing on this? Because my attitude, because in the UK, obviously we're a disaster. However, the recruitment agency market is like feeling really positive. And I'm thinking okay, how do these two things chime? But actually, that makes sense, because when your economy is kind of cratering, and there's like, you can't move people, you can't find people, etc., etc., agencies can kind of go countervailing the general economic trend, because it means that there's more pressure on companies to hire, and they're just putting the jobs out to agencies and say, oh yeah, we just need this person, get me somebody.
I'm finding a contracting market is picking up, definitely, where people are trying to mitigate that risk and not taking on the permanent employees at the moment, and get a nice healthy balance there, which is a good thing to see. I did see during COVID that employers were trying to drive down salaries because there were so many people in the market looking for jobs. I was advising against that, because you're just shooting yourself in the foot, because come March, April this year, when the salaries have gone back up, they're walking out the door, and you're paying me another fee, which my bank balance would love, but I don't like to manage my clients that way. It's not the way you do business, and it's going to. You've just really got to make sure you do look after those people, and make sure you're not going to undercut them, because they are going to walk out the door, and you can't afford that at the moment, because it's going to cost you another 30 or 40,000 on top of what these tech guys are getting now to replace them, to headhunt another person of that caliber.
Okay, and the final question for you both, actually, and this is interesting, I think, because you're both kind of setting up like your own businesses, and you know, not operating as an employee yourself. Do you see that there's going to be an increasing fragmentation of the marketplace as more people set up their own businesses in this way? You know, sometimes, you know, when you lose a job, for instance, and the market's terrible, what are you're going to be smart about it. You're going to say, right, I can probably hack something out myself. It would make more sense for me to do that. That's what I did. You know, rather than, you know, go through the rigmarole of trying to get a job, keep a job, and all that type of stuff. Do you see like more solopreneurs, I guess is the term, starting to occur? Let's go with you on this, Z.
Yeah, I think, well, you know, the tech is out there. It's actually fairly straightforward to set up your own business. You could, you know, do a whole range of different things. I think, you know, people have been looking at their kind of side hobbies, and everyone's, you know, not everyone, but a lot of people have been running side hobbies for a little while. And then, you know, you get a redundancy or something, you think, hey, I got some cash now, maybe I can make this a viable option. And definitely the tech is out there. I know we've just had a big discussion about not being able to hire actual coders, but there's so much you can do without knowing any coding skills these days. You know, you don't need coding skills to build a fairly decent website anymore, or an e-commerce store. You know, so it definitely could. I think so. I think it opens up a lot of opportunity for people to do their own businesses now.
Yeah, that's a really interesting angle as well. You know, the ability to get to tap into the online world is now very, very accessible. You know, you rewind back 20 years, let's say, or in Sergey's kind of era, 35 years. You know, joking, Sergey. It was like super expensive to do anything online. Like, you'd have to get a software house to do it. It'll take 6 months to put up a website, whatever. These days, anybody can get something online, probably in 24 hours or less, and it could be trading as a business. You could get on with it, and that, as you say, lowers the barrier for people who are currently employed, not happily employed, maybe put on furlough, whatever, to pop out and maybe start trading in some way. So it's an interesting phenomena to observe. Hey, listen, guys, I'd love to keep you on, but I've got to keep moving because we're well over time. So thank you both for coming on and having a chat with us. Please hang around. We're going to keep talking for another half hour or so, I think. So thank you, Zichuan. Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
All right, cool. Very interesting. I'm a believer in the solopreneur model, by the way. I think it's really interesting effort to do, but it's super hard. I think I know why it's hard. The reason why is I've failed twice at being a solopreneur. Even went bankrupt once. But I've figured it out, sort of. And it's all about making sure you have the right distribution channel in advance of your service. No good just to have the service.
I just need to pick Zishuan's brains on how to build products without hiring coders.
Dude, there's lots of really good tech that helps you do it. I mean, I think there's product and product, right? In the sense of, you know, if you're building a deep product, then of course that's going to take a huge amount of effort. and engineering capacity. But generally speaking, if you're setting up a website and you're selling widgets,
of course, yeah, it
generally
depends on the product, but there is always the IP aspect of it.
Yeah, I think that website to simple apps, these things are becoming easier and easier to build. And 99% of most businesses, I think, can trade comfortably without them. In other words, the tech is going to be a shop front for what it is, rather than the actual thing people buy. And there he is, Gareth Flynn. Gareth, how are you doing, sir?
Hi, Gareth.
Thank you. Nice to see you both. Good. It's been a long time, Hung.
It has, and I beg your pardon for keeping you kind of hanging on. I know you're into the weekend now, but we've been having such a great chat so far. Gareth, for the people who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself, who you are, what it is you do?
Yeah, sure. So Gareth Flynn, I set up a talent consultancy called TQ Solutions some 13 years ago. So we advise enterprise on talent strategy, talent operating model, etc. I'm also co-founder and director of a really interesting startup business called The Career Conversation. It's a digital learning business, some really interesting stuff actually we're doing in hiring experience, particularly in mobility, ironically. So,
yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah, and great to have you on the show, Gareth. Lots of things you can talk about. And, you know, there's probably one thing that I want to really touch on is, you know, this responsibility that TA folks had over the last 12 months. Suddenly we were external only for a long time. You know, that was your job. You're there to grow the business. Someone else dealt with internal mobility. In fact, no one dealt with it, but it was definitely not us. But during the COVID era, a lot of the TA folks were basically redeployed to do redeployment themselves, right? They were saying, right, we're not recruiting anymore, but you need to help other people move around the business. And then suddenly we got involved in this part of it. I just wanted to get your view on whether that is a viable future path for TA to go down, to not just focus on external, but also on the internal side.
Yeah, look, it's interesting, Hung. Before I started with TQ, I actually used to work for ANZ Bank down here, and we were managing internal mobility for ANZ Bank 14 years ago. So this is not a new thing. And I think before COVID, a lot of our more progressive organizations were pursuing this as a service offering and bringing it into talent acquisition. COVID's obviously just fast-tracked it. So I think this is a complete no-brainer. I know a lot of people online will know TQ's and my view on this. Talent acquisition, I personally think is gone as in its old form forever, and will become more. We call it talent engagement and mobility. It's an engagement business. It's managing experience. Yes, it has acquisition in there. That's important, but mobility will become an increasingly important part of our role. It has to. It's I think the future of our industry.
Why are you saying this in such emphatic terms? Like, why are you so confident that this is going to be the case, Gareth?
There's a few reasons. I think there's a business imperative now to do it, which we never really had. So I think commercially, companies have realized the importance of mobility. And, you know, here we've been talking about our talent shortages. You know, if you've got talent shortages, your strategy cannot be acquisition. It has to be build, develop, retain. And so, you know, the whole mobility career development piece is going to come in focus. And I think the other thing, Hung, that's really changed is the technology landscape. We didn't have the tech 5 years ago. We've got lots of tech now. That means we can do this at scale and not just doing it for our top 200 or top 2% or whatever it is that we used to do it for. We can now manage mobility at scale through a service model within a talent function.
Like what tech, though? I mean, you know,
there's a few examples. Let's pick on Gloat. I mean, Gloat is a great example. Israeli company focused purely on talent marketplace technology. You've got ProFinder in the UK. You've got some phenomenal case studies around this space. There's Rejig here in Australia. A lot of the big vendors, whether it's, LiveHire locally as well, have moved way more into mobility. For non-people have focused on internal now as well as external. You know, there's a lot more movement in this space. It's white hot in the technology vendor space.
Yeah, really interesting. And some of these names are really familiar. And yeah, shout out to Rejig and to LiveHire, Aussie companies, I think. at least certainly based down here, as kind of attacking this market. And I absolutely think it's such a growth market to be in. I think one thing that this period has really taught us is that we generally had neglected internal mobility, didn't we? Like, it was never a strategic priority for businesses. We always fixed it by an external hire. And in large part because we didn't know the skills, we didn't know who had the skills internally. We didn't know the sentiment of the staff either. And we were very kind of careful about sort of having conversations with people because we didn't want to be seen as internally poaching from one team or the other. But we're beginning to realize that that's actually a really poor strategy for things like retention, for instance. Like, a lot of people that end up leaving, you might have kept that person had there been a pathway for that individual to do a job in a different part of the business. And while you've already invested so much in there, trained them, enculturated them, they have so much institutional knowledge, so much social knowledge, they walk out the door because you weren't able to provide this opportunity for them that's actually totally relevant because there was a disconnect in your internal processes in some way. Question for you, Gareth, in terms of, okay, I'm a TA person, I'm sitting in a business, and I really want to take ownership of this internal marketplace, internal mobility, but I'm still perceived as the external hirer. What are the steps that I need to take to start have the conversation internally to make this happen? And what are the things I need to do to demonstrate that I should be the person doing this job?
Yeah, look, I think the start point here, Hung, is you got to look at the organization. So we talked about maturity earlier on. If you've got a culturally immature business around talent, this isn't going to work. It just isn't going to work. So you've got to have the right cultural mindset towards people and talent. That's imperative number one, and that has to be probably exec driven. So it's probably this is a bigger thing than talent acquisition. Talent acquisition can't do this by itself. This has to be. This is actually a business strategy. It's not a TA strategy. So the organization's got to be ready. They've got to recognize the benefits of doing this. Yes, actually, people in TA now should be educating their execs on what is going on and what benefits can come out of this strategy. But it has to be an enlightened leader and an enlightened organization to get this. And I think once that's done, the people and talent function holistically will bring this strategy to life. The old TA team will just then be part of that solution, but it won't be a TA team. This is a company play. It's not a TA play.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying there, Gareth, is that, listen, you've got to understand where the parameters are currently, and the role that TA needs to play. Firstly, is to set the scene, educate, make sure that the context is starting to evolve, and then make sure that you are kind of prominent in the conversation as you go forward. But it cannot be just locked into this silo. Like we it's almost like we're a caterpillar needing to burst out of the chrysalis. It's a complete change of form that we need to undergo. Very, very interesting. Okay. What about the sort of the wider things that are, in fact, no, let's put it into a different context. One of the themes that we wanted to explore with this pivot to Australia is to say, look, is the conversation different here compared to different places in the world? Now, it's a bit unfair to ask you, Gareth, I know your focus is in this market, but I wonder, with your connections and conversations with people outside of it, where do you see the differences in Australia and New Zealand? I don't want to talk necessarily about, we're always behind, because I don't think that's always the case. It's a bit of a. By the way, wherever I go previously, every territory I went to, everyone thinks they're behind. It's like, who's there? It's bullshit. It's just everyone's got this insecurity. But what are the differences, like the substantive differences in Australia and New Zealand when you talk about things like internal talent mobility, redeployment, stuff like that?
Yeah, look, I think, firstly on that, we do get around a bit. So I was on the phone to an IT company in New York this morning and a big international bank in Europe and Asia last night. So we see some of this stuff happening globally with the work we're doing. And I I don't think we're that different. I think the only thing that's different here, we're not a great leader of new stuff. We're not an early adopter. We're actually a bit of a laggard. You know, I was in California at a conference last year, and I went to see some of the tech companies. They're early adopters. They'll trial stuff. They're into fast fails, and learn, adapt and change. We're not that good at that culturally. So I think we're quite slow off the mark. I think we're a little bit more conservative, and again, especially on the technology side. And I think how we can overcome that is through pilots. You don't need to bring in a mobility solution for Telstra as an organization across the entire board. Do it for a business unit. Do it for a geography. Start small, land, expand. And I think that's the strategy that will work best here in Australia. It's small, bite-sized pilots, prove the concept, get everyone engaged and bought in, and then expand. Whereas I think, there's some pretty good cases out there, like a Unilever. They went big bang. They did it, woof, extensively on a mobility strategy and a marketplace strategy. I don't think we do that well here. I think we've got to start smaller, and we're a little bit more conservative here.
Yep, that's super interesting to observe. But it's useful for people thinking of getting into this market or trying to deploy a solution, because a lot of the things you mentioned are international services. The companies, the pro founders of this world and what have you. There's no reason why that's a UK specific product.
There is here now. In here now.
Really amazing. You allowed Roger to do business here? That's
well, it's Alpesh.
Better. Sorry. Right. Okay. Final thing, Gareth. Time is pressing for everybody here. What's your prognosis for 2021 recruitment overview for Australia and New Zealand? What are the positive things you see? What are the things we've got to look out for that may not be so positive?
Yeah, look, I'm relatively optimistic about the year, given our kind of where we are with COVID itself and with vaccine rolling out, et cetera. So, I think locally here and New Zealand, we'll get back to whatever normal is at some stage this year. I think most of the companies we're dealing with are in growth mode. They're not, apart from hospitality and a few sectors that have been smashed. A lot of organizations are in growth mode, and they've not been in any mode for 6 months. So they're really fast tracking what they're up to. So I'm quite buoyed by the economic recovery this year. But who knows, Hung? Who knows whether a mutant variant will strike and the vaccine doesn't work and we're into another crock of shit for 12 months? Who knows? So I think whatever your view on where we're at, I think we've got to temper it with we just don't know. There's too many unknowns still to come. So we've got to expect a lot more volatility. We've got to expect a lot more uncertainty. And that, when you're building a talent acquisition operating model, would I be stacking it full of lots of permanent headcount right now? No. Would I be looking at hybrid models with RPOs or with contingent workers or with augmentation people? Yeah. Because you want the flex. If I'm building a service model for a talent function, do I want to have mobility and career management and outplacement services in there? Probably yes, because you want the flexibility to be, whatever we get hit with, we can respond to. Companies want is agility, flexibility, and the right services at the right time, and that's what you've got to build for.
You know what? This type of very volatile, unpredictable marketplace, it will exactly promote this alternative workforce that has been growing incrementally over time, but it's going to just spike up like this, because worst thing any business can do is to put down fixed costs. You need to flex everything. This is the tech. No one's buying software that you commit 10 years to. No, you need to be able to switch this shit off. Same with office stuff. Like, you can't be putting down a 10-year contract on a building. That would make no sense. Same thing with a human worker. And we need to wrestle whether this is a good or a bad thing. I think a lot of people kind of presume permanent employing is the gold standard. But what does it mean if it's permanent when the person gets made redundant anyway? It's always been a false term to describe it as permanent. So we need to find a different way to do it. Anyway, Sergey's had enough. That's fair enough. We've been on here for 90 minutes. Gareth,
I just need to answer someone. Someone is calling me urgently. I'll be back with you in a second.
No worries. I didn't realize you were still here, Sergey. That's okay. Listen, Gareth, I don't let you go because time is pressing. We're about to finish the show. Good to see you, man. I want to bring Stan on, and we'll finish off the show shortly. Stan, thanks for your patience, man. I don't even know what the time is over in Perth. It may well be coming to the end of the day for everybody, so we're coming to a close on this. We want to bring Stan on. I don't know, talk about mining, talk about baseball, maybe. Definitely answer the questions. So we'll see how we go with that. But you know what? The alternative workforce is a super interesting phenomena. What is the impact for us in TA for that? Because TA have been hyper focused on permanent hiring. So if we stick to that idea, we're really going to start seeing a shrinking sort of marketplace for us to trade on. TA, I think, need to expand not only on the internal space, as Gareth mentioned, but also become experts at figuring out what is happening for non-permanent employees. There he is, Stan Rolfe. How are you doing, sir?
I'm fantastic, thanks, Hong. I've just read a funny comment somewhat by Joe McCarthy about Perth and how far we're behind we are.
You are behind. No, you're not. Perth is paradise, man. Good to see you, dude. Very nice. And by the way, I keep in touch with how you and the boys are doing. I see some great scenes, particularly in the sports field and stuff like that. So say hi to the lads for me when you get off the call, man.
I will do. I've told them not to play the PS4 because it was impacting my networking speed, so they're chopping at the bit to get back on.
I need to get you off the line, man, because they gotta get back to whatever it is they're playing. Listen, Stan, for the folks who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself, who you are, what it is you do?
Yeah, 20 years in TA. Last sort of 3 to 4 years spent in technology consulting under my own business. At the beginning of the year, joined a company called Training Unlimited, which is a private training company specialising in qualifications for aged care and childcare, and also set up a recruitment agency for the same business just prior to COVID. Parked that for now, and that's starting to ramp up as well. So a big focus on aged care support workers and childcare educators.
That's interesting. And obviously they're growth markets, I guess.
Huge markets. They're forecasting, so support workers, both in-home and at centres, 50,000+ aged care workers and something like 35,000 childcare educators around Australia.
So I think this has always been a persistent problem, but even more so now, where everyone's like either locked down, distributed, just dislocated, and we're kind of very sensitive to the idea that there've always been these vulnerable people that need support, and hence how do you do that? So I guess this is one of the future industries, isn't it? Like the social care side is probably a growth market for any developed economy, I would guess.
Yeah, and what's really exciting for me is most of these industries typically attract people who live locally. So some of the marketing initiatives that I'm going to be able to try out at some point are going to be around geofencing. So I live in this particular area. I want to try and find opportunities in the surrounding suburbs no more than 10, 15 minutes away because I may or may not have public access to a car or transport. So, yeah, some really exciting stuff. But the challenge still will be these are lower paid roles dominated by females. It's just trying to access a larger pool of people from a DE&I perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to figure out how that future is going to look like. Like, what is the role of technology in that? Is it something that can be where technology can help? Like, I've noticed some things that are really interesting about, like Japan was a good example of this, where a lot of their kids are getting like taught English by Nigerian mothers, for instance, because there's a bunch of Nigerian people that speak good English, and they can now remotely beam it in, rather than, you know, get your a sort of backpacker type person who typically would do that, but they're not there anymore. So, you know, there's all kinds of ways in which hopefully technology can help. And the geofencing side, I think, is again super interesting. I can see a kind of a mobile focused way to try and get that talent to the places. Perth, Western Australia, generally a very different economy, I would say, to, you know, what most people think when they talk to people in Sydney or Melbourne. It's a lot more mining, it's a lot more resource extraction, stuff like that. How has the last 12 months or so impacted that side of the economy, Stan?
Very little, to the point where much of the talk in the town. So about 10 years ago, we had a big boom before we had the big bust. Everyone is talking this cycle that we're in here in the WA economy is bigger than any previous upswing we've had before. The massive issue, the issues around that are resources, right? So again, much like everyone else has said, it's how do we get the talent into WA? Because we just don't have enough people in WA to fully staff some of these big mining projects, and then cater for the replacement of the people going from one industry into mining as well. So it's interesting. One of the big federal government initiatives was providing a 50% wage subsidy to 100,000 trainees, and that's up to a maximum of $7,000 per quarter, and that's almost exhausted within 4 or 5 months now. Across any industries. But it's just, I think Gareth made a comment in the chat section before around building and growing your own talent to resource. That's the way that needs to move, that we all need to move, especially here in WA.
Yeah, I mean, population shortage, plus mining has its own kind of conditions, right? I mean, you're not living in a nice town, you're in a mining town for a long period of time. Is your circumstances like viable for that? Presumably with just the pandemic, there's a lot of immigrant labor you cannot rely on. There's none of that anymore. So some super interesting challenges in how you staff that up. And training is one way, but it takes time for people to get to a level of competence. And training is not only the solution for mining, simply because, you know, a lot of young people, for instance, they may not be able to relocate to these places. You know, there's life circumstances associated with all of this. So it's going to be fascinating to see how the WA economy kind of progresses going forward. Let me just conscious of time as well, Stan, because we're like really bleeding through. Final question for you, WA. What do you see it? How do you see it economic-wise, 2021?
It'll outpace every other state here in WA, for sure. It's all the indicators are there. From unemployment trend is going down, which is great. Gold price going up, iron ore price going up, which means the state government making a lot of money to then invest in infrastructure. But the problem will be we just don't have the resources to deliver those infrastructure projects. And just to go back to Gareth's point around mobility, especially in the aged care and childcare sector, and the impact it will have on contractor spend, because a lot of these organisations that have large casual workforces, that will be brought in-house, because what will happen is those individuals will be required to work at single site. So I work at one aged care facility, I'll only be able to work at that one. I won't be able to go and work for the X, Y, and Z companies doing casual shifts elsewhere because of the increased risk around COVID. So certainly from Gareth's point, internal mobility and a larger resource talent acquisition, talent engagement team to cope and manage that will be a big factor here in WA, I believe.
You know what? That's actually a really interesting phenomenon, isn't it? Like the idea of working multi-employer or multi-site, that may not be a feasible way of operating simply because of the public health issue. And, you know, I think Gareth is right in we can't be depressed by this, because this is the reality. The best thing we can do, the worst thing we can do is have false optimism in a situation like this. But you start seeing things like these mutant strains happening. That's normal evolution of any kind of life form, but it's happened. And it seems that, okay, maybe one of the strains, if you like, is resistant to these vaccines that are coming out. This is what I've got. Early reading of this seems to be a little partially the case on this, in which case we might see a return of the pandemic, and we've just got to be smart about it and say, okay, the future is going to be, always changing. We just can't sort of grasp onto this image. There'll be a return and it'll disappear. Anyway, Stan, really good seeing you, man. But I'm conscious of how long we've been online, and people have got weekends to get on with. So thanks everybody for joining the show. Stan, thank you so much. I'm gonna get you off the line because the kids have got to play the game. So tell them I did say hi. And I'll catch you guys soon. Okay.
Take care, man. Bye everyone.
Okay, cool. Listen, that's about it. We're well over time, everyone. This is a record length of time on air. I'm sure you're all sick of hearing my voice. I certainly am at this point. Sergey has left, which is, a sign of the times. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed the conversation.
I'm actually here, guys. Sorry.
You are back. Sergey, I need to apologize to you, dragging you to do this for like 2 hours rather than one.
No, this has been fascinating. Thank you very much, Hong, and I really appreciate your waking up so early for this.
The time management is something I have failed to achieve, probably because of COVID. I'm blaming COVID-19 for that, because there's no deadlines anymore, so it's like, yeah, whatever. Anyway, listen, have a very good evening and weekend, everybody. Thanks for joining the show. Thanks again to our sponsors, Daxtra. Check them out if you need any kind of work with your existing data. If you need extracted, parsed, searched, matched, whatever it is, Daxtra are the business that's going to help you revive a lot of that internal data that you already have. Okay, that's it. We'll be back next week. We're talking LinkedIn, by the way, with Andy Foote. LinkedIn changes for 2021. If you use LinkedIn, you really do need to register for this show. Andy, for people who don't know, is my go-to person for what's happening on LinkedIn. He's got lots of different sort of spies in there to figure out what the future looks like. So if we use that platform to do any recruiting, which if you're watching this show, you probably do, you need to register for the next one. All right, listen, that's about it. Everyone have a good weekend. We'll see you all next week.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Bye, everyone.
Okay, do I go back to bed? No, it's time for breakfast, I think. Okay, have a beer on me, everyone. Thanks for joining.